It has been about 9 months since I last talked about the Hisuian starters and their potential competitive viability, and I wanted to revisit this topic today because the information in those videos is outdated, because now we know more about how Gen 9 actually works as far as the competitive format goes, and these Hisuian forms in general have considerable changes that could have a noticeable impact on their potential viability. So we are going back over these again. So starting with Typhlosion, as I stated in the past video, this is a fire and ghost type, which we know does not have the greatest offensive spread, though it is not bad. And offensively, you do have 6 things you're super effective onto, as well as very few Pokemon that actually resist the dual stab. So what's interesting about this typing in Gen 9 is this has pretty good offense into a couple of very common meta Pokemon right now, and both of its stabs have super effective damage onto Goldingo, which we know is incredibly common in both tournament play as well as the ranked ladder. So on that alone, there's already a use case for Typhlosion, but it gets more interesting when we dive into its new ability. Originally, from the information that we had before Gen 9's launch, its ability was shown as Flash Fire. However, thanks to new information, we know that it is actually Frisk, which in a ranked ladder format that does not have open team sheet, Frisk is actually a very good ability to have, especially for a Pokemon like this. Because if you're using this as, say, a Goldingo counter, it's very helpful to know the item that is on it so you know how to use your Typhlosion to counter it. Because if we look at the stats of Hisuian Typhlosion, we can see it's faster than Goldingo at 95 base speed, and it has a pretty good special attack stat as well at 119 base. Now, defensively, it's just okay, it's really not that special, probably going to get one hit by strong super effective stab, and the physical attack stat is also something that you would not be typically using. So these stats, when combined with Frisk, you will be able to know with certainty if your Typhlosion can outspeed Goldingo, which is crucial if they lead Goldingo on your Typhlosion. That essentially puts you in a commanding position to outplay a Goldingo lead quite easily, especially since most of them are still Terra type, which is not going to resist the fire moves coming from Typhlosion. Now, something else interesting, so of all the signature moves for the Hisuian starters, I believe this one is the one that has changed the least. So Infernal Parade is very much so like Hex in that its power doubles if the target has a status condition. The only difference is this has a 30% burn chance, which, considering how Scald is essentially not in this game, like it was taken off of most of the Pokemon that had it, this could be a useful substitute for Scald, and if you ever get the burn, your damage is doubled. The problem is, it's not a great move for this kind of Pokemon. Typically, you'd want something that has a lot of bulk to be able to set up and try to stall with this. You just have a 30% chance at a potential out, which you may be better off just running Will-O-Wisp instead. But this Pokemon has a very unique gimmick in that it currently has the most powerful eruption in Scarlet and Violet. Of course, these Hisuian forms are not yet in competitive play. They will eventually, we just don't know when. But when it does arrive, it will have the strongest eruption in the game, which, if you've ever played against a Torkoal team, you will know that that Terra boosted eruption is incredibly strong. So you could actually pair Typhlosion with a Torkoal and have probably the most offensive spread move in the game, which it's already hard to take Torkoal's eruption. This eruption is going to blow through just about anything, which may increase the need for Wide Guard if this thing ends up being popular. Like, the rest of its moveset's not particularly special, you know, you have the typical fire moves. It's mostly just offense, and there's a lot of physical coverage on this Pokemon as well, which you would not be using. So outside of 2 stab moves and perhaps a coverage move in the form of maybe Solar Beam or Terra Blast if you want to run it that way, this Pokemon really only has one mode, and that is Hyper Offense. Now, you could run it slow with maybe an Iron Ball and Trick Room, which it would still just be geared entirely for offense anyway, and you just rely on its very high offensive stat combined with the potential Sun Boost and the Terra typing to give this thing the offense to effectively one-hit everything that's in front of it. I still find it very interesting just how well this plays into Goldingo, because of how strong Goldingo is right now. it makes me wonder if Goldingo was balanced with Hisuian forms in mind, because just looking at some of the Hisuian forms, they're oddly decent into several of the current meta options in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But I think this Pokemon's actually pretty good, and I would not be surprised if this becomes relatively common. Maybe somewhere in the 5 to 8% usage on Pikalytics. That's kind of my guess. Okay, next is Samurott, that water and dark typing. Interestingly, resist Goldingo's stab perfectly, which you could almost use this as a defensive switch-in for Goldingo, and then you have the super effective Dark-type offense into it. Which I know I'm talking about Goldingo a lot, but it's just so interesting how it almost looks like this was designed to counter it. Oh, but maybe I could just be crazy. I'm scarred for life by Goldingo, so now all I see is Goldingo counters. Anyway, getting into the defensive spread, it's fine. I'm not really going to talk too much about it because I did go over it more in the previous videos. Offensively, you have 5 super effectives onto relatively common typings. And again, very few Pokemon actually resist water and dark, so it is a relatively consistent offensive typing as well. Now, the ability changed from Shell Armor as it's hidden to Sharpness, which is considerably better because increasing the power of slicing moves by 50% is actually quite good for a Pokemon that has several slicing moves that it has access to, which we will get into in a bit. Going over the stats again, it has that very obnoxious mixed spread with a bias towards physical. Now, defensively, it's also not particularly special, and well, its speed's fine. I think it's technically faster than Goldingo. It is conveniently faster than Goldingo by 1 unit. That's very interesting. Now, this is still slower than Annihilate, though, which would be able to beat this thing up pretty solidly. So it's an interesting speed tier, and you'll definitely have to build this based on what you actually want it to do, whether you want more speed in it or just more bulk or something. Though for the most part, speed's probably a good idea to invest in. Now, remember Ceaseless Edge, that strange physical dark type move that did chip damage in PLA has been completely reworked to now have spikes. So the spikes trap effect activates whenever you use Ceaseless Edge. It's still not very strong at 65 base power and 90 base accuracy, but it does get the sharpness buff. So the power of this move is actually 97.5, making it a very strong physical dark move, and it has the added benefit of the spikes effect. Now, one thing that I don't know is how the super effective on this particular spikes works, because if it takes the dark typing, then it'll do additional damage to ghost and psychic types that switch in, but it will also do less damage to like fighting and fairy types. That is something that I don't know how it works yet, but it would be very interesting if it does work that way. Now, for its other stab, it has Razor Shell, which also gets the sharpness buff. This also gets Night Slash and Aqua Cutter, which again also get the sharpness buff. Actually, Sacred Sword is considered a slicing move too, so you get the 50% bonus on Sacred Sword as well, which ignores stat changes. So I could definitely see this being the 3rd move that this Pokemon runs, just because that's a pretty good offensive move in general. Having the sharpness buff on this means you're essentially getting stab on it. That's something to keep in mind. So I actually think this Pokemon was buffed considerably just by switching around its ability, because now it actually has pretty good offense, and it also has a speed tier that allows you to outspeed Goldingo, and a typing that defensively also pairs very well against Goldingo. So this has a point now, and this might be a popular choice in Rain teams, even though it doesn't really get the speed bonus from Rain like most Rain sweepers do. This does have a better offensive spread because it has access to very strong dark type moves as well as strong water type moves. But I have a feeling this Pokemon is mostly going to go under the radar. I just don't predict a high amount of usage, but I think it would be very fun to build a team for this, now that it seems like it kind of has a point. Also, there is Sucker Punch. Okay, now to talk about the bird. Grass Fighting is such a weird typing. That Flying 4X is not great, you're also weak to some other stuff. Fire and Fairy are quite common right now. He only resists 6 typing, so defensively it's just, as I said in the previous video, it's a bad defensive typing. The main benefit you get is the powder immunity from grass, which is nice to have, but there's better options for that. Now offensively it's not bad. You do have 7 types that you are super effective on. It's just there's a lot more things that resist both of these stabs than the other 2 Hisuian starters. So it's not exactly a better offensive typing, because it trades more super effectives for less consistency. Now, the ability this Pokemon got was Scrappy, which will allow its fighting type Stab to hit ghost types, as well as blocking Intimidate. So you can actually hit a Goldingo with super effective fighting moves with this Pokemon, even if it doesn't terrestrialize into Mono Steel. There I go talking about Goldingo again. I still find its stat distribution weird, because it's not particularly fast. Why does it have 95 special attack? I have no idea. You're never going to use that. And 112 physical attack is good, and it does have a little bit of special defense. But considering the defensive spread of this typing, it's probably still not going to last very long. Now, the Terrestrialize gimmick can help a lot with this. To potentially make this very good defensively, you could switch it to, say, Poison, to only be weak to 2 typings. But you still don't have that great of an offensive spread. Now, that signature move has been adjusted a lot, because now what it does, it has a 30% chance to lower the defense stat or flinch. That's a strange move. It also does have increased base crit rate. So it's really not a bad move. It is a bit random in just what it does, because you have a 12% crit chance, 30% chance of either lowering defense or flinching. Like, there's so much randomness going on with triple arrows that it's really hard to just predict what you should do with this move at all. I guess it's a consistent fighting move, like 90 power, 100 accuracy, and you have the roll for some potential extra bonus behind it. But those bonuses are not something you can rely on, so it's more of a nice to have than something you should really play into. Now for the grass stab, we do have Leaf Blade, excellent move, which actually is very similar to triple arrows, now that I think about it. They're both the same power, they both have the heightened crit chance, and they're both 100 accurate. Okay, so triple arrows is basically a Leaf Blade with additional potential effects. Yeah, that's a pretty good move. Curiously, you do have 2 priority moves in the form of Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch. And if you're running a defensive Terra type, Bulk Up's probably going to be pretty good on this. Now, it does get supportive moves like Feather Dance, as well as Taunt, and even Tailwind. And if you want to run the best fighting move in the game, it does have Close Combat. And you get access to Knock Off and Roost, again, also very good moves. This Pokemon's just hard to place, because it has access to some really great moves that could potentially make it quite useful to have. It just has really awkward limitations that you have to work around too, like its odd speed stat, its odd typing. Its ability's fine, but nothing too special. Has priority moves, has heal moves, has buffing moves, can even set Tailwind. That's just so odd. Like, I don't really know what this thing specializes in. It kind of doesn't. It's sort of a weird multi-role, tries to do everything, but is kind of weird at all of it, which the viability of that is completely uncertain. I'm not even going to try and predict that. This thing is just weird. Having access to more moves than it did in PLA made it even stranger. I used to think it was bad, but now I'm not sure, because the Terrestrialize gimmick could kind of fix it up to where it's probably okay, but I don't know how good you can get it to be outside of some very specific scenarios. I'm just not entirely sure how to place this as far as viability goes. Which, for that reason, it's probably not going to be very common unless a pro player builds it into a team and gets like top 8 at a large tournament with it. Only then would you start seeing it places. But it is otherwise quite strange. Now, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.